The whispering woods deep in the heart of an ancient land, there lay a forest unlike any other. It was called the Whispering Woods not just because of the wind rustling through the trees, but because the trees themselves seemed to speak. Locals said if you listened closely, you could hear the forest whisper secrets of the past and messages for those who were willing to hear. Leo was a curious 12-year-old who had always been fascinated by stories of the forest. His grandmother told him tales of spirits in the trees, glowing stones, and lost guardians of nature. Most people in the nearby village were too afraid to enter the woods, but Leo wasn't like most people. He believed the forest had something to say, and he wanted to hear it. One sunny afternoon, while exploring the edge of the forest, Leo felt a strange tug in his chest. It was as if the trees were calling him. He stepped beyond the first line of trunks and suddenly felt a hush fall over the world. The air was cooler, the light dimmer, filtered through a thick canopy above. As he walked deeper, he began to hear faint whispers. "Follow the light," they said over and over, barely louder than the breeze. Leo turned his head, searching for the source. Just ahead, a thin beam of sunlight pierced through the trees, illuminating a narrow path. With a mix of excitement and nervousness, he followed it. Birds watched him from branches, squirrels darted between bushes, and flowers turned their faces toward him, as if recognizing his presence. The beam of light led him to a small hidden grove surrounded by towering oaks. In the very center, resting on a patch of moss, was a glowing stone. It was smooth, greenish-blue, and pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Leo knelt and touched it. The moment his fingers met the stone, warmth spread through his hand and up his arm. His vision blurred, and in his mind's eye he saw images. A fire burning through the woods long ago, animals fleeing in panic, a group of hooded figures chanting as they restored the land. Then he saw himself, older, standing among the trees with the glowing stone around his neck. When he blinked, the visions faded. The whispers grew clearer. "You are the chosen one," they said, "the guardian of the woods." Leo felt something change inside him. He wasn't sure what it meant to be a guardian, but he knew the forest had trusted him with its secrets. As he stood, he noticed vines curling gently around the stone, lifting it toward him. He took it and placed it in his pocket. The moment he did, the grove brightened, and birds began to sing. He walked back through the woods feeling watched, but not in a threatening way. The trees now leaned slightly toward him, as if bowing. The path back seemed easier, as though the forest was guiding him out safely. When he returned home, his grandmother was waiting on the porch. She looked at him, then at the faint glow coming from his pocket, and nodded slowly. "I knew it," she said with a smile. "It's your turn now." From that day on, Leo visited the forest every week. He learned its ways, protected its secrets, and listened to its whispers. The Whispering Woods had chosen him, and he had accepted. A boy had entered the forest, but a guardian had returned. The Bear and the Bird. In the northern reaches of the forest, where the trees stood tall and the winters were long, lived a large, lonely bear named Boris. He was a gentle creature with thick brown fur and kind eyes, but most animals stayed away from him, frightened by his size. Boris didn't mind. He enjoyed the quiet, watching snowflakes fall from pine branches, listening to the wind howl through the trees, and curling up in his den when the cold became too much. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, Boris prepared for his winter hibernation. He gathered berries, roots, and anything he could find to make his belly full before the long sleep. Then, one frosty morning, as he was walking near a frozen stream, he heard something strange. It was a sound of crying, soft and high, like a whistle in the wind. Boris followed the sound and soon saw a small figure in the snow. It was a bird, tiny and trembling, with one wing bent at an odd angle. She had fallen from her nest during a recent storm and couldn't fly. The bird looked up at Boris with fear in her eyes. "Please don't eat me," she squeaked. Boris blinked, then chuckled. "I don't eat birds, especially not sad little ones." She looked surprised. "You don't?" "No," he said gently, "but you'll freeze out here. Come with me." The bird hesitated but couldn't argue. The cold was biting, and her wing hurt too much to move. Carefully, Boris scooped her up with his big paw and placed her on his back. She buried herself in his warm fur and quickly fell asleep. Back in his cave, Boris made her a soft bed of moss and feathers. He named her Pip. Each day he brought her small bits of food and kept the cave warm with his body heat. They talked for hours about the sky, about trees, about dreams. Boris had never had a friend before, and he found he liked the sound of Pip's stories. Pip, in turn, had never known such kindness. Winter passed slowly but peacefully. While the world outside was silent and white, the cave was filled with laughter and warmth. As spring began to peek through the snow, the forest awoke. Flowers poked out of the ground and streams began to run again. Pip's wing had healed, and one morning she stretched it wide and fluttered around the cave. "I can fly again," she chirped happily, twirling in the air. Boris smiled, though his heart felt heavy. He knew what this meant. "You'll be leaving soon," he said quietly. Pip landed on his nose. "Only to see the sky. I'll come back." And she did. Every morning, Pip flew down from the treetops to visit Boris. She brought him news from the clouds and sang him songs she heard from other birds. In return, Boris told her stories of the earth, of roots that spoke and rivers that remembered. Seasons passed. The forest changed with time, but one thing stayed the same: the friendship between the bear and the bird. Creatures from all around began to hear the tale of the gentle giant and the brave little flyer. It became a story told to young ones at night, a legend of kindness and loyalty. Boris was no longer lonely. He still loved the peace of the forest, but now he also loved the joyful flutter of wings, the cheerful songs at sunrise, and the company of someone who truly saw him for who he was, not a beast, but a friend. And so, the forest thrived, not just with trees and snow, but with the warmth of an unlikely friendship that lasted for years and echoed in every birdsong and every paw print left in the soft earth. The Lost Map. On a rainy afternoon, 12-year-old Ella was exploring her grandmother's attic when she stumbled across an old wooden chest. Inside, buried beneath dusty books and photographs, she found a yellowed, crinkled map. Its edges were torn, and strange symbols were drawn in faded ink. At the top, in elegant handwriting, were the words, "To the Forest of Secrets." Ella's heart beat faster. Her grandmother had told her bedtime stories about a mysterious forest nearby, but Ella always thought they were just fairy tales. Now she wasn't so sure. The next morning, with the map folded carefully in her backpack, Ella set off toward the forest. The trees stood tall and silent, their trunks wide and twisted with age. As she entered, the world behind her seemed to disappear. The forest was quiet, too quiet, but she followed the symbols on the map. Strange markings on the trees matched the ones on the paper. An owl hooted in the distance, even though it was daytime. Small animals peeked out from bushes, watching her silently. As she walked, she passed through arches formed by vines and over tiny streams that glowed faintly blue. After hours of walking, just as the map had shown, Ella reached a circle of large stone pillars hidden deep in the forest. Moss covered the stones, and in the center, there was a patch of grass shaped like a perfect star. She stepped into it. Suddenly, the ground trembled. One of the stones began to glow, and a soft hum filled the air. Slowly, a hidden door in the earth creaked open, revealing a staircase leading downward. With her flashlight in hand, Ella descended. At the bottom, she found a chamber lit by glowing crystals. Shelves lined the walls, filled with scrolls, books, and carved wooden boxes. The air smelled of pine and old paper. On a large stone table, there was a book titled Guardians of the Forest. As she flipped through the pages, Ella realized the forest had once been protected by a secret group of caretakers. They had recorded the magic and history of the land, and now it seemed she had discovered their hidden sanctuary. Ella Sanrio. She didn't know why the map had found her, but she felt it was the beginning of something special. She carefully rolled the map back up and whispered, "I'll protect your secrets." And as she climbed back to the surface, the forest seemed to sigh in relief.